Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to go over the notable additions to the color blue from New Capenna, and then I'm going to go over why it has brought blue to the forefront of the standard meta. Why is blue now arguably the best color in the game? So, let's get into it. To get things started, I'm going to go ahead and just show the notable additions to blue, and then I'm going to go over why they are so incredibly significant to the color. I think it's best to start from the lower mana cost cards and then work our way up, just because the higher mana cost cards are a little bit more niche, whereas the lower mana cost cards are more of the essential cards. So the first thing that's really important to note for blue is that blue got access to a bunch of removal. The first of those removal options is Endless Detour. This is a rare spell from New Capenna, and it enables you to remove pretty much anything from the board. So it can return a Vanguard, it can return a creature, it can return a non-land support, it can get rid of things from a graveyard, and it can even get rid of things from a player's hand. So this one is really good because it prioritizes the top and then works its way down. So you're going to get rid of a Vanguard first, and then you're going to get rid of a creature, and then you're going to get rid of a support. So chances are, if you're holding onto this card, you're going to play it, you're going to get rid of something nasty from your opponent's side of the board, and that's always something good. The other thing that really stands out about this card is it's only 6 mana. So even if you're playing with a Planeswalker that doesn't have great mana gains, you're definitely going to be able to get a lot out of this card because of its mana bonus. If we work our way up on the mana scale, and I'll say that last card that I showed is one of like the middle tier cards of all of these excellent blue cards. When I say middle tier, I mean that like these are all great cards, but it's sort of in the middle of like how good these cards are. The next one on the list is going to be Void Rend. This one is an absolute top tier card. It's a must-have for all collections. This is a 9 mana spell. It can't have its mana drained or raised, which is largely insignificant. It can come in handy from time to time. But the real key of this is that it's got destroy an opposing Vanguard if you can't, destroy an opposing creature if you can't, destroy an opposing support. So this card is significant for a number of reasons. First, it's got just straight up destruction for blue. Just absolute destruction, right? And blue really doesn't have any other flat out destruction in the color. Blue is a color that does not tend to have destruction. It needs to have multicolored cards in order to enable it to destroy things. And so Void Rend is able to do that. Now, part of why Void Rend is so significant is because it's able to destroy Vanguards, which is good. It's able to destroy creatures, which is great. And that last piece, it can destroy an opposing support. So this can destroy lands. This can destroy non-lands. It's one of the very few removal cards in the entire game that's able to get rid of lands and non-land supports. Most of our destruction right now for supports is going to limit it to non-land supports, whereas Void Rend is able to get rid of anything. The mana cost at 9 mana is very reasonable. It costs less than a lot of the really good just black removal cards that cost 10, things like Hagra Mauling. But nonetheless, this is a 9 mana spell, very easy to cast, and it's going to get rid of something outright. Just an absolute must-have card, like I said, for all collections. We've got Out of the Way, and this card isn't going to look significant at first glance. We'll need to actually look at the cards that have come before it to understand why this is a big deal. But for Out of the Way, you're going to draw a card, you're going to return a creature to its owner's hand, and if that creature is green, you're going to gain 6 mana. The really big piece here is that it just says return target creature to its owner's hand. As you'll see in just a few minutes, I'm going to go over the blue cards that have come before it that are currently in Standard, but we don't really have access to just a straight up return a creature to its owner's hand. It seems that in the current Standard, there's this limitation of your opponent has to have 5 or fewer cards in their hand. And so if you try to bounce something, that's what returning a creature or returning something is called. If you try to bounce something to your opponent's hand and they have a full hand, it actually destroys it. So that's actually been one of the ways that blue has been able to destroy things in Puzzle Quest historically. And so to have a card like this again for blue is very good. The next one on the list is one of the absolutely broken cards. It's Cut Your Losses. So This is a 9 mana spell. You're going to destroy the top 10 cards of your opponent's library, and then you're going to convert 10 gems to blue. Now, if it only ended there, it would still be an absolute must-have card for all collections, because the amount of mana ramp that you get from this is just absolutely insane. If you look at a lot of green gem conversion is somewhere in like the 5 to 8 range, but there are some in the mythic range that do 10 or more, but nonetheless, there's very little that does that. This is going to do 10 to blue, and on top of that, it has the new mechanic Casualty. So when you cast this card, you may destroy a creature you control with power equal to or greater than the casualty value, so a creature with 2 or more power in this case. And if you do, you're going to create a copy of Cut Your Losses in your hand and give it full mana. That copy is not going to have casualty. So basically, if you have a creature with 2 or more power on the board, you can cast Cut Your Losses, destroy that creature, and you're going to be converting 20 gems to blue, which is going to be enough to power up the mana to pretty much everything in your hand, especially if you're playing a walker that has good mana gains. This is another card that's just an absolute must-have. It's a card that I would say you're probably going to throw into almost every blue deck, unless you're trying to save some blue supports because of their shield count. But this card here is absolutely bonkers in the current standard. Even in Legacy, it's a phenomenal card. So definitely something to keep your eyes out for as you're pulling packs. It's not a card that you're going to chase because it's not uncommon, but nonetheless, it's one of the best cards in the set, hands down. Which brings us to yet another uncommon, and this one is arguably even better than the previous one somehow. So Sleep with the Fishes is an 11 mana spell. It is an aura, which is significant for Light Paws. Light Paws is a creature that's going to enable you to just fetch out auras and play them for free, effectively. But Sleep with the Fishes is going to disable target opposing creature, and then you create a fish token. That fish token is pointless, mostly. It's a 1/1 unblockable. You're not going to do anything significant with this fish token unless you buff it to high heaven. But nonetheless, the fish token is only really significant in that your opponent will actually use their removal spells on it, which is really nice. They're going to destroy those fish tokens instead of your good stuff. But the real key to this is the disabled target opposing creature. That creature does not become enabled at end of turn. It's permanently disabled. So you're basically taking one of your opponent's creature slots and just getting rid of it. And part of what makes this so crazy is that you just target something and then you don't have to worry about it again. Greg does not often destroy its own creatures. Remember, Greg is what we call the AI. And then on top of that, most of the removal that we have at our disposal in the game right now is destroying our opponent's creatures, but it's not destroying our own creatures. So if you're running a deck that has only 3 creatures, and creatures are your win con, which is the grand majority of decks in Puzzle Quest, then if you go up against an opponent with Sleep the Fishes and they're able to get those Sleep the Fishes down, then you effectively get completely locked down, and there's a lot of decks that really just can't do anything about it. So Sleep with the Fishes is going to make it so that there's yet another blue card that we have to completely build around if we go up against a blue deck. I say yet another blue card because Wizard class already exists in blue, and so as it is, you kind of have to prepare for the possibility of going up against Wizard class. Test of Talents exists in blue. It's another card that you have to prepare for yourself to go up against, so you need to find a way to be able to destroy those supports. Now, as we make our way to the higher mana cost cards, there are really 2 in particular that I think are of note that are really worth going over. The first one is Lord Xander the Collector. This card is a really good card, and the more that I play with Xander, the more that I think that Xander is an amazing card. So this one has, when this creature enters the battlefield, your opponent discards 2 cards. Now, when Xander first came out, he was making your opponent discard the first 2 cards in their hand. They have since fixed Xander, and Xander's now making your opponent discard the last 2 cards in their hand. But nonetheless, having additional discard in blue is really good, especially with the deny mechanic that we got from Puzzle Masters. So this, in conjunction with Teferi, or even if you're running Ambiguity, or just any of the other blue Puzzle Master cards with the deny mechanic that are going to make time bubble gems, this is just going to lock your opponent out of having cards, and it is really frustrating to go up against, because not only is it going to do that, But it also has, if this thing dies or loses a reinforcement, you're going to destroy half the opposing cards at random, rounded down. So if this thing does come down, it's kind of a pain to get rid of it, because if you do get rid of it, then you're going to lose half of your cards. And since it just is half of the opposing cards, it doesn't include the cards in your hand. They're just things on the battlefield. That does include lands, that does include supports. So it is going to get rid of those when it dies. It also includes creatures, for that matter. So really, nothing on the board is safe from Xander when Xander dies. So Xander is a phenomenal card, enters the battlefield, does really bad things. When he attacks, he actually does really bad things for your opponent. I'm finding that the more that I'm playing with Xander, the more often I'm noticing that I'm getting that gain 10 loyalty. Because especially with Cut Your Losses, the destroy 10 cards from your opponent's library and then convert 10 to blue, between that and Xander, you're going to get a bunch of cards in your opponent's graveyard. You're going to get to 30 pretty easily, which means that now Xander is going to enter the board, make your opponent discard 2. When he attacks, you gain 10 loyalty, and if he dies, your opponent loses half of their cards. So Xander is really just going to give you a lot of control, and has turned out to be a really, really good card. And now, I know that this one's kind of cheating because Meeting of the Five is all 5 colors, but because Xander is, in my opinion right now, probably the most significant of the 3 color cards that you're probably going to be wanting to fetch from the new set, you can tell me if there's something else that you'd want to fetch more in current standard from the new set. But nonetheless, Meeting of the Five is going to enable you to fetch Xander. And so this is significant because it's just going to make it so you can fetch Xander more often. Now, for those of you who are like, oh, but Balthazar, Xander is mythic. I mean, first up, it's cool. It gives you something to chase. But second up, Xander has a full art version. So you will be able to pick up Xander from Fibblethip if that's something that you want when he arrives. So now I want to go over a little bit about why some of these cards are significant. I know that I've mentioned it, but if we go to all of the other blue sets in Standard right now that do not include New Capenna, and you just go to destroy creature, right, in the search, then as you pull up destroy creature, I know that there are cards that are coming up, but those creatures don't actually destroy creatures. Those supports don't actually destroy creatures, right? So the destroy creature that blue has, it has Raven form, which is exiling a creature, but for 14 mana and gives your opponent a token. And it also has Turn to Frog, which is going to destroy a creature and is going to create a token on your opponent's side. Now, Turn to Frog is a really good card because it destroys and it replaces the creature with a piece of garbage, which means that you can then just destroy that again. So for destroy objectives, Turn to Frog is a really good card. But beyond those destroy objectives, it's not something that you really want to reliably count on, right? You don't want to bank on Turn to Frog for destroying a creature. So that was it. There is no destroy creature in blue. It just doesn't exist. And then if you go to the return creature, right, because that is blue's general way of being able to get rid of creatures, right? We look at Fading Hope. You'll notice that it has 5 or less cards. We look at Into the Royal, 5 or less cards. We look at Alchemist's Retrieval. Well, this one requires you to cleave it. Depart the Realm, 5 or less cards. Bury in Books, 5 or less cards. We go through to even more of them. Divide by 0, 5 or less cards, right there at the beginning. Harbinger of Tides, 5 or less cards. And so there just really isn't anything good that has existed in Standard otherwise. Displacement Wave is kind of okay, but really not that good because it's going to wipe the whole board of creatures, including your own. And while Wash Out is kind of nice, it costs 17 mana, requires Mana Field, and has only 2 shields, so it breaks pretty easily. So with all of those things in mind, blue just really hasn't had good access to removal before New Capenna. And then if we now go back to the New Capenna cards, you'll see that just it really opens up a lot of options for you to build because the cards in New Capenna are going to enable you to get rid of things that you weren't able to previously get rid of. And that's why cards like, for example, Void Rend or Out of the Way or even from the very first page, Endless Detour, are so good because there's nothing about it that's saying you can't do this if your opponent has this. You can just freely use it. You can get rid of cards on your opponent's side of the board. And that was really blue's biggest weakness going into this new set. And then if we just look at some of the other stuff that exists in blue, and here I'll be more specific, but what really makes blue, I think now the best colored in Standard, is we have Teferi. Did I do this? Did I done goof? Teferi. Oh, right there. Right. Yeah. Okay, cool. We got Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria's heroism emblem is just absolutely ridiculous. This is some of the best, if not the best, removal we've arguably ever gotten in Puzzle Quest, right? Just because every time you draw a card, you're going to exile something at random. You're going to draw a card every turn. The +2 is going to make you draw a card, so that means 2 cards per turn. And when this says you're going to exile an opposing card at random, it actually prioritizes creatures. So it'll get rid of your opponent's creatures before it gets rid of their supports, which means that it's going to lock down your opponent's board really effectively. We've also got Wizard class, and if anyone at the studio is watching this, please nerf this card. Seriously, please nerf this card. Make it so that it can only activate like twice per turn or something. As an uncommon, this thing seriously needs something holding it back. And I'm sure that there's going to be a few people in the comment section who are like, Nelthazar, how could you say this? I'm especially expecting Gauze to say this. But nonetheless, Wizard class is way too strong. It's a completely warping card. It's just absolutely insane. And you just see a lot of blue decks that are able to run this. Now, I will say that one thing that I like about Wizard class is that because Wizard class decks predominantly only require you to have a bunch of like commons and uncommons, once you get Wizard class, it's really easy to build a powerful deck. And I do like that there is an easy way to build a powerful deck. I just don't like that this loops and is as powerful as it is. I think it's too strong. And then the last one that I mentioned earlier, but just so that you can see it, right, if you're not familiar with the card, is Test of Talents. So this is another one that I think is like a pseudo game-breaking card at times, just because it makes it so that you can't play spells, right? Or your opponent can't play spells. I say you or your opponent based on who plays the thing, but it's something that you absolutely have to build around, right? Like if you're going up against a blue deck, you need to try and include some way of getting rid of supports that is not spell-based, because otherwise Test of Talents could totally just ruin your parade. If you're going up against a blue deck, you absolutely are going to have like a very reasonable amount of support removal, because you need to be able to get rid of Wizard class if that thing comes down. So that's really what I wanted to go over from New Capenna in terms of cards. The way that I've personally been running blue, I've been running blue in a lot of ways, but if you know anything about my playstyle, you'll know that I particularly like to use monocolor planeswalkers. It is my favorite way to play the game, and that's just because monocolor planeswalkers tend to have the best single mana bonuses in the game. And so as a result of that, you're able to do things with monocolor planeswalkers that you really can't do with any other walkers outside of Legacy. And that is just get a ton of mana and play a ton of cards. So if we were to take Puzzle Master Teferi as an example, right, who has actually been my favorite one to play with, Puzzle Master Teferi has a +6 to blue, which is a staggering 9 mana for all blue matches, which is really good and really important, because if you'll remember that Void card, right, which I actually took out of this deck for Dak Faden, I'll get into that in just a moment, it is 9 mana. So this here is the deck that I've ultimately enjoyed the most. I've been tinkering around a little bit. I'm going to be making a separate video on this, which is part of why I didn't fully go into it with Cut Your Losses. But when you look at this deck is just absolutely cracked. I want to say that I've played, 20, 30, 40 matches with this deck, and I've never lost more than maybe 20 health. Like, you don't take damage. And there are just so many games where you completely lock your opponent down. And you're going to see this deck in the gameplay. So this is the deck that I'm going to be playing in the gameplay. But part of why I actually took out Void Rend is, I think what it's called, for Dak Faden, is because Dak Faden has Magecraft 1, meaning the ability is going to trigger whenever you cast a spell. It has Magecraft 1, so it's only going to trigger once per turn. But you're going to gain control of target opposing creature until end of turn. And this is significant because with Cut Your Losses, it has this new ability, Casualty. And so you cast Cut Your Losses, you destroy 10 cards from your opponent's library, you convert 10 gems to blue, and then Dak Faden is going to steal an opponent's creature with Magecraft, because that's what Dak does. And then Cut Your Losses is going to be able to Casualty sacrifice the creature that Dak Faden steals, and then convert another 10 gems to blue. So not only are you going to be converting 20 gems to blue for this, but you're going to be destroying an opposing creature. So this turns into 9 mana, destroy 20 cards from the top of your opponent's library, destroy target opposing creature, convert 20 gems to blue, which is just absolutely ridiculous. The other reason I took Void Rend out of this deck, beyond the cut your losses and Dak Faden being so ridiculous, is because you don't want to destroy a creature that you've already targeted with Sleep with the Fishes. Once something has been targeted by Sleep with the Fishes, it's over. So in this particular deck, you're going to get to see Sleep with the Fishes, you're going to get to see Cut Your Losses, and you're also going to get to see Xander in his best element, because Xander is going to be making my opponent discard cards. The Puzzle Master Teferi between the Deny Gems is going to be creating the Time Bubble Gems, and the Time Bubble Gems are going to be making my opponent discard cards. And then, of course, I'm also running Silent Blade Oni, which is going to be making my opponent discard cards. So, oddly, blue is in like one of the best places for a discard deck. I would even argue that it's in the best place for a discard deck, just because Puzzle Master's Teferi is better than any of the Black Walkers for making your opponent discard cards at present moment. Now, I know that this is a relatively stacked deck in terms of mythics. However, I do want to point out at the very least that on the mythic side, the Prismatic Bridge does indeed have a full art card, so you can pick that up from Fibblethip. And Lord Xander also is going to have, as I said, a full art card, which you can pick up from Fibblethip. The rest of the deck is very reasonable. Solundi Visions is kind of like an automatic must-add to a lot of blue decks now, because this lets you fetch a spell from your library, and it's going to enable you to fetch either Cut Your Losses or Sleep with the Fishes, whichever it is you feel you need more at the time. So do you feel like you want a ridiculous amount of mana so you can cast everything in your hand, or does your opponent have a bomb out that you want to make sure is not able to do anything for the rest of the game? So that is my deck. I suppose there's one other thing that I should mention about Dak that I forgot to mention, which is that Magecraft 1 for Dak works if you even have 3 creatures. So even if you're running 3 creatures, then, which I sort of am, between Xander, the Silent Blade, the Bridge bringing out Asika, and then the fish tokens from Sleep with the Fishes, you're still able to steal a creature from your opponent to get yourself to 4 creatures, and then you can still sack it with Cut Your Losses. So, anywho, let's go ahead and check out the gameplay. So this match wasn't exactly my fastest match that I played with Teferi and with this particular build. However, I thought that it was, of my recorded footage, the best example of everything working how I wanted to showcase it. So you'll see that I'm up against Tamio. I am in an event here. And so my starting hand is very vanilla. I've got Solundi Visions, I've got Dak Faden, and I have the Oni. And so here, what I want to do is I want to try and inhibit my opponent's board a little bit. I've already got to Sleep with the Fishes, so I'm going to go ahead and instead take my blue converter. And this turn right here is, I think, going to be the best example of why blue is just so incredibly ridiculous right now. So take a look at the board state, my opponent, and my hand, right? I've got things that cost 20, 17, 11, and 9 mana. My opponent has 2 creatures down, 2 cards in hand. I play Dak Faden, I play Cut Your Losses, which is going to convert 10 gems to blue. I'm able to steal my opponent's creature. I get a huge burst of mana. I'm going to sacrifice my opponent's creature now to get another copy. I'm able to play Sleep with Fishes, so my opponent's card is now just completely neutered and not going to be able to do anything for the rest of the game, which drops a Lord Xander down and makes my opponent have a hand size of 0. And voila, from there, my opponent had 2 cards in hand, 2 cards on the battlefield, and now they had nothing at the end of that turn. And on top of that, I wound up gaining somewhere in the realm of, 9, 20, 17, 11, and 1, so that's 20, 40, 50. I gained almost 60 mana that turn, right? And I was able to completely neuter my opponent's board state. So, I mean, I feel like that alone, like I could even just almost end the video right here and you'd see like, wow, that's just ridiculous. But it gets worse. So for my opponent, not for me, right? So one of the things that you have to do with this is you do definitely have to manage your hand a little bit. But even then, like it's not all that crazy. So Tamio used her second ability, so my Prismatic Bridge in my hand is going to be disabled this turn. I won't be able to cast it, which is fine. I'm going to go ahead and use Teferi's first ability every time I can so that I can get as many Time Bubble Gems on the battlefield as I can. Those are going to help me keep my opponent's hand in check a little bit better. I want to get my opponent's hand back to 1 card. My opponent has 2 cards right now. I don't like that. So as you see, I can't play my bridge, but I will be able to next turn. So here I've got a 5 match on the bottom, which is great. I was able to steal an old growth troll from the Silent Blade Oni because it's going to steal something from my opponent every turn. And so I get 2 time bubble gems there. I destroy one, but I get another one anyways from the improved gems. Now I'm just going to be able to play out my hand. I'm going to get rid of the fish. The fish is a pointless token to have out. Honestly, a 1/1 token is just bad. And now I can use Dak to go ahead and discard the card in my hand to draw 2 more. I don't want to play the Water Veil here because I already have one down. I don't want to give Tamio another swap. But I do definitely want to use Deny here, my first ability, so I can try and get more of those time bubble gems down. Try and make it so my opponent can't play anything. I'm going to take that landfall ability because although I'm destroying a time bubble gem, I'm gaining one. And right there you'll see that Xander is already hitting and giving me 10 loyalty. So my opponent gains mana, but then they lose it. They've got an extra swap, but that's no big deal because they're going to lose it again. So you'll see that even though my opponent got a 5 match, they weren't able to play anything from their 5 match. I get another Xander now with Prismatic Bridge, meaning my opponent's back to 0 cards in hand. And as I said at the beginning, this isn't the fastest match ever because I'm not like going all Super Saiyan on my opponent, but I mean, the level of control that you can get now in Puzzle Quest, along with the amount of tempo that you're able to build for yourself, is just absolutely staggering. And so, on top of that, you know, the Silent Blade Onis are 6/6s, the Xanders are 6/6s, so you're definitely going to be building up as you go. And so you're going to be able to kill your opponent, and your opponent is just not really going to be able to do very much. So I'm going to keep getting more time bubble gems here as I am getting my cut the losses. I am actually going to go ahead and destroy my opponent's troll. It's going to convert gems to green, and then it's going to convert gems to blue. I was hoping I'd be able to get like a whole bunch of fun conversion there, but I didn't get it. I should have actually played the troll warrior token because with the support that I stole from my opponent, it's going to copy creature tokens every turn, but copying the Asika token is worth it too. Like either way is honestly fine. So you'll see that I'm getting extra swaps up the wazoo. I don't really need all those extra swaps at this point, and that definitely is part of why this match is taking a little bit longer. So I'm just going to go ahead, keep taking them, keep playing cards, and keep showcasing why this deck is absolutely ridiculous and busted. I'm not going to sacrifice anything there with my cut your losses, but at this point in the game, with how much card generation I have, I'm just going to go ahead and keep taking more cut your losses. I'm going to try and use Dak, but I've already used Dak this turn, so I can't. And at this stage, my best bet is honestly going to be to just cut your losses again, because my mana bonus is going to get me 10 if I want, but to block down Xander so that if my opponent somehow draws a bunch of cards, I can just get rid of them on my turn. And so you'll see that I'm getting a bunch of loyalty again from Xander, although I think I'm actually capped out at 30 loyalty here. I forgot to use Deny, I think, maybe? Not sure. But either way, it doesn't matter. Like I can do whatever I want at this stage. I don't want the insect tokens. Those are dog do. I could use my second ability to get even more mana if I wanted to, but why do that, right? My opponent has 1 card here, so I'm going to go ahead, draw 2. I wind up getting another Xander, which is perfect, because if I just get more Xanders, then that means that I'm going to be able to kill my opponent all that much quicker. So the 2 Xanders coming down are definitely going to ensure that I'll be killing Tamio this turn. I'm going to Solundi Vision here for Serum Vision, not Serum Visions, for the Seagate. I check my objectives because I was actually playing this in an event, and so I very foolishly use my second ability. I say foolishly because I'm just drawing out the match. I'm extending the inevitable, but yeah, this game is very over. So I'm going to block those down, swing, and kill my opponent. So hopefully this showcase showed you guys a little bit of what I was talking about, why blue is so crazy. It'll help you build a little bit for blue decks for yourself. Thank you guys so much as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.